Hi, I'm Janine, and this is Outside the Box. Standing by to join me is Emma Rothman. She's an author, heart transplant recipient, and mental health advocate. And she's written this great book called Things My Therapist Doesn't Want Me to Say 10 Years Post Heart Transplant by Emma Rothman. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Janine. It's so nice to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And go Cuse.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
We met on LinkedIn, which is really cool. And I I was so inspired by hearing you just graduated what, 2021?
Yeah, yeah. So I still feel like I'm in college and I'm hoping my gap year never ends.
Yeah. So what was it like for you being a student, 2020, March 2020, here we were, in lockdown. Where were you at that point?
I was abroad in
Whoa.
Denmark. I was doing SU abroad, which many of my friends, and I think Syracuse is really well known for its
Yeah,
robust programs.
right.
And I was actually in Denmark when the pandemic started. And I remember reading like the Times right before I was going, and I was getting anxious. And as an immunocompromised individual, these types of pandemics are always on your mind, and they have been on my mind since I had my transplant when I was 12 years old. And so the anxiety of going into a foreign country with this kind of like eating away at the back of my mind
Mhm.
was something that was always on my mind. And before I left, I had connections to the hospitals that were near my university in
Good.
Denmark. So if something were to happen,
Smart.
I had always have a plan B of what is my emergency action plan going to look like if I'm not near, my regular doctors at home.
Hmm.
And I actually bought my ticket home before my program was canceled, and removed myself from my program because I no longer felt safe abroad. The virus was spreading, and because there was such little information and it was happening so quickly, everyone thought it was the flu. But of course, all the flu tests are coming back negative.
Right.
Um, so March 10th, I bought my ticket, and by March 13th, I was home and my program was canceled, I think on March 11th. And I ended up being the
What?
last person to leave before all of my friends, although they had to pay over $1,000 for their plane ride home, and I think I paid around 400.
Oh
So the
my God.
surge of chaos
Yes.
was so quick and so unprovoked that um, at that point I just wanted to get home at any cost, and so everybody really kind of was kicked out, and we had a final date where we had to be gone, and after that they were like, we can't support you anymore, like our borders are shutting.
Yeah.
So my pandemic experience started off as trying to get back into America. And then after that, I was on severe lockdown. I don't think I left my house for 4 months,
Four
maybe
months?
five,
Whoa.
because as a transplant recipient, you really can't take risks like that. And I think the first time I left my house was to go to the doctor's office. And I remember the internal anxiety of a drive that is normally meant to feel like my safe space, right? In a hospital. I know everybody knows me, and all of a sudden this place felt foreign. And the roads were deserted, the hospital was deserted. And it was,
Oh,
yeah, it was a little bit kind of feels like it didn't even
eerie.
happen. Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then I graduated at less than a year, almost a year later.
But you graduated remotely?
I had one in-person class my senior year, so I was actually pretty lucky. I know a lot of people did not, and a lot of people didn't even return to campus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I worked really hard to kind of work on a harm reduction type of model.
Hmm.
Um, so I could still have a little bit of a college experience, but still do it in the most safe practice possible. And obviously that was figuring out a vaccination plan and
Yeah.
making sure all my roommates were vaccinated as well.
Sure. I still am thinking about how you started this conversation by telling me that you had the gut instinct and the smarts to book it out of there before most people. That is, your
You listen
parents
to
must have been
funny.
like, yay, this is incredible. What a plan.
Yeah, funny Tommy. I had a really great boss. I worked actually on the education or outdoor education group, And the Barnes facility that they just opened, the new gymnasium,
Yeah.
has a rock wall. And so I worked at the rock wall, and I also was a trip leader and an obstacle course. So I was really involved in the outdoors at Syracuse, and I had an amazing boss always tell us at every single training, before every single group facilitation project, trust funny tummy. And she's like, it doesn't matter what the protocol is, it doesn't matter what's happening, it doesn't matter who's there or who's not there. She was like, at that moment, you need to step up and listen to your gut. And so
Oh,
Julie DeLeo, it was one of the best bosses I've ever had. And in that moment, I was like, funny tummy, this is bad.
yeah.
I have to go.
What great advice,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
So,
Phew. And then what happened next? Because at what point did you decide you were going to write a book?
so the last 3 months at Syracuse University were quite chaotic. The university had just opened up, and in April, 1 month before I graduated, I celebrated my 10-year heart transplant anniversary.
Mm,
Um, and then, like 4 weeks later, I graduated college. And as someone who has grown up in a hospital, the future is a really terrifying place to be because if you're always waiting for the next crisis, there's not a lot of time or honestly even energy to imagine or spend time thinking about what you want. And so college to me was this completely foreign idea that I was so uncomfortable imagining going, let alone graduating, because I never thought that I would be healthy enough. I never thought I would be smart enough, good enough, all the enoughs to actually
oh,
get there. And then the fact that I was graduating right after this insane milestone
yeah.
um, was a recipe for a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, sure. Because you had so much uncertainty about what's next.
Really, and the pandemic added a whole extra layer, I would say, of uncertainty that I hadn't really budgeted for. And I don't think any of my doctors, or honestly, like my therapist, who I still meet with at the time that I was meeting with then, we both sat in sessions and sometimes in silence because there really was no direction. And that was, I think, the catalyst for starting my book is where are the effing directions for how to graduate college and be
Right.
a 20 something in a world with no support after you leave college?
Yes. In a pandemic.
Right. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. In a
And add
pandemic.
in COVID and yeah. Whew. Have you been an introvert most of your life or a mix?
That's an interesting question. I would say I definitely am introvert. I can be extroverted, but I need, if not more time to recharge as
Yeah.
an introvert.
Yeah.
Um,
You have to go back home, you have to unplug, disconnect. Yeah.
my bed has always been my safe space. That
Yeah.
is like where I plug in and plug out the rest of the world.
Yeah. Wow. And so how were things going back home? I mean, I don't know if you've always been close to your family, but was it just so comforting? Was it just also you're probably thinking, wait, what am I doing here?
It was definitely weird because when you're home, the last time I was living at home for that long, I was in high school.
Hmm.
So it was definitely an identity crisis because now I'm 20 something. I'm this whole other person living in
Yeah.
upstate New York, and now I'm
Yeah.
trapped at home. Um, and my parents and I have a wonderful relationship because I grew up sick and in a hospital. I've had to rely on my parents
Hmm.
probably more than most people have relied on their parents.
Yeah.
And our relationship is really, really strong
That's great.
um, because of that. And I'm like so beyond privileged to be able to have that relationship with my parents and be able to rely on them in that capacity.
Yeah.
No questions asked
You're very
for my
blessed.
parents.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And so you had this idea for the book. Did you write the book as a draft and then you put it aside, or did you connect with people? No, you just wrote
No.
full speed ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I don't do I
That's
don't plan
good.
ahead very well.
That's so
Uh,
good.
I had no idea how the book was even going to end, let alone if I was going to be the one writing the end. So there really was no plan with that. It was honestly, I've always like retreated back to journaling as my therapy,
Great.
and especially as a trauma. I would say we were talking about survivor, but as someone who has endured a lot of trauma,
Mhm.
journaling has been a way where I can say what I want about what I've been through without worrying about how I'm going to make other people feel, especially when you're sick. You're always worried about everybody else kind of orbiting around you and how your sickness
Right.
affects your loved ones.
Yeah.
So I've always been a journaler since I was young. I've had like journals since I was in middle school, writing stuff out. And
Amazing.
so that
Amazing.
was kind of where I got most of my inspiration from is journal entries. And I have like over 400 notes in my phone of just random like sentences, like essays, just
Your
like
next book, your next book.
right, yeah, probably. I hope not, but I
Not
always knew that I
now.
wanted to,
Yeah.
and right, and I always knew I wanted to write a book. So it was really kind of the right place at the right time. I found the Creators Institute who helped facilitate this journey for me.
What's it called? The Creators
The
Institute?
Creators Institute, correct. New Degree Press is my publisher, and they have a partnership with Creators Institute, which is run by a professor from Georgetown, actually, Eric Koester.
Okay.
And he approached me through the Launchpad at Syracuse,
Yes.
which is, are you familiar with the Blackstone
A little bit.
Launchpad?
Do you want to tell a little bit about it?
So the Launchpad is the incubator space for the Syracuse University and outer community. And so the Launchpad has a group of mentors, which I was, and each mentor has a group of portfolios of about however many startups are in that year. And then we also run business plan competitions as well as provide free resources to student startups.
Fantastic.
And most notably is Spark Charge came out of the Launchpad, which just was featured at the White House actually for the renewable car like program. So
So
we've
cool.
done really, really amazing stuff. And Linda Dickerson Hartsock is the executive director and who's kind of retiring. But I had like the launch pad in my LinkedIn bio.
Okay.
And so Eric was like, hey, I think my class might be helpful as a resource for, the startups that you're mentoring. And he sent me a note like, please let me know if you could refer anyone to my class. And it
Good.
was the writing class.
Yes.
And so I kind of had that in the back of my mind again, and I just like kind of ignored it a little bit. I thought it was like a AI like spam message. So I was like, there's no way this is real. It's too good to be true. Right? Like how many
Right.
messages do you get
Oh,
a
I
day?
agree. I know. You'd think it was bogus. Yeah.
Right. And I was like, there's no way this is real. It's way too good to be true. Um, and so I enrolled during the pandemic actually as an author myself, and then I
Mhm.
dropped out because everybody during the pandemic was like learning another language and deep cleaning their room and putting together family trees and
Okay.
crafting and
But you were
writing
writing a
and
book.
not during the
Oh,
pandemic.
not at all. Okay.
No, I dropped out of the class. It
Okay.
was just I wanted to be on that productive TikTok like
Yeah.
grind.
I get it. I get it.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I was just under way too much stress. So then the next year is when I started writing, which was in 2021.
Good. Well, sometimes you need to disconnect and recharge, like completely let your brain just relax so you can come up with something even better than you imagined without putting pressure. Because I know a lot of people felt a lot of pressure, like, oh, you're probably loving
Absolutely.
this stay at home and you're creating and writing and producing. And people are like, no, I'm not. I'm on
Yeah, I'm
TikTok.
having a really hard time
Yeah.
getting out of bed today.
Yeah.
And that might be my win for the day is moving my
Exactly.
body.
Brushing my hair.
Um,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly.
So, and then I enrolled right after I graduated. So May 2021, I would say by August, I had already had my introductory call with Eric, and my like intro interview. And then
Okay.
by September I was already meeting with my editor and started, producing like 3,000 words a week kind of draft. So it's like four
Okay.
pages, single space.
Yeah. And we talked about this, but how is this a boost to your mental health by being part of this book writing process?
I didn't realize it was a boost, I think, until I finished. I would say that during I really thought it was a detriment, which was
Okay.
not what I expected at
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
whatsoever, right? Journaling had always been this really therapeutic thing for myself. And then all of a sudden, my journal wasn't just for me anymore. It was for my editor. And then in
Hmm.
my back of my mind, I'm like, Emma, people that you know never going to read this. And then even scarier part is like people you've never even met before are now going to have access to what you've been holding on to for the last 10 years. And
Yeah.
so that pressure, I would say, definitely did not help
Sure.
my
Because
mental health in the beginning.
were you thinking like, how much do I want to reveal?
Right, right. And part of my writing process was at the beginning, I thought I could take the easy way out, right? And kind of have more of an objective where I kind of choose when I want to insert myself, but
Hmm.
more so the broader idea of like what living with a heart transplant was like instead of what Emma Rothman's experience of living with a heart transplant was like.
I see.
And I thought I could take the latter, and then the writing was horrible, and my editor was like, what, why are you doing like I'm gonna need more from you, Emma. Like I'm gonna need you to commit to this. And so once my editor was on me and my therapist was like, hey, I think we should talk about this, why aren't you writing? And I was
Hmm.
like, everybody in my life was like, no, come on. And so it was hard to avoid at that point. And then the other kind of aspect is that once I committed to it, I made myself promise that once I was committed, that I had to keep that promise of only being honest.
Yeah.
And once I did that, while it was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done, I'm so grateful because I believe that the book is truly so much better
Yeah.
with the fact that it's completely unfiltered and it's completely 100% how I was feeling during all those moments that I write about and all those stories that I share.
Has your therapist read it or your parents?
Yes. Yeah. And the secret is that my therapist actually wrote the last chapter.
Oh, did
So
you say The
we
Secret?
yeah, I'll let the
Okay.
out of the box community know first. But
Okay.
yes,
Well, thank you.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Amazing. And do you feel freer? Do you feel like a weight's been lifted, being able to just be authentic?
absolutely, absolutely. I had no idea how much I was um holding on to, like the burden, right,
Yeah.
of kind of what I was talking about before, that, you know, transplant recipients can kind of be like at the center of the sun, and then everybody else is kind of orbiting around, right? You have your medical team that's probably orbiting really close, and then your parents, and then, cousins, aunts, uncles who show up at the hospital when you're sick, and then your friends. And when you feel like you're at the center of all of this and they're all relying on you to kind of keep going, it's a lot of pressure. And I didn't choose for this, right? Like I didn't
Yeah.
want this to happen. I didn't know it was going to happen. I
Right.
woke up after a coma and was told I had a heart transplant. So that burden of feeling like all of that was my fault has been dissolved now that I have had the opportunity to tell my perspective without my parents' help, really, without my doctors in the room or
Hmm.
anybody else kind of helping to contribute to my story, which is important. And there's
Yes.
time and space for that, absolutely. But this time it just needed to be me.
Yes. Your voice, just your voice. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you were 12 years old and you had a heart attack?
Pretty much. When I was 12, I was in and out of school for the month of March. At first, we thought it was the flu, but of course, flu tests kept coming back negative, and my symptoms weren't going away. And normally, a flu lasts like about 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And now this was like week 3 and 4 of having no energy, like the worst fatigue I've ever felt, where I would only be able to go to school for half a day, and then I would come home and sleep for 4 hours, eat dinner, and then sleep for another 9 hours, and repeat
Whoa.
that for a couple weeks.
Hmm.
So they thought, with that kind of symptom presenting, that it was mono,
Hmm.
just because of the fatigue. And so I was in my doctor's office trying to get that blood test for mono, and I coded that never were able to draw blood.
Oh,
Yeah. So I was in the right place at the right time
thank
on the right
goodness.
day.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
And then the next time when you woke up, you had surgery.
So I think that happened on March 26th or
Hmm.
28th. I forget. And then April 1st, I had my heart transplant. And then I woke up, I think, 2 days later. I think I would have wanted to wake up earlier, but the sedation was taking a little bit longer to wear off than they
Yeah.
had hoped.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then when I woke up, I thought I was still in New Jersey at my doctor's office, 6 days ago. And so when I woke up, surrounded by all these people I had never seen before in a space I had never been before, um, with like tubes and wires coming out of me in all different directions. And I was also intubated, right? So when you're intubated, you can't speak. And like kind of like when everybody was seeing on the news those ventilators for
Yes.
COVID patients,
Yes.
it's the same thing. So hearing that I had a heart transplant, and now I can't even talk to respond because I have a tube down my throat that's breathing for me. So I
Oh,
really couldn't
Emma.
react either.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
They had to
and
keep you
then
really calm.
they did, and I did not know this until I started talking to my family about this, but
Hmm.
my parents were really afraid of how I was going to react. And they said that they had like a team there just in case that things didn't go as smoothly as they were hoping for. But in my head, I don't know, I don't think I would have ever done anything like
Yeah.
dangerous or
Sure.
unsafe. But
Yeah.
in their eyes, like I can completely understand why they wanted to take those precautions.
Yeah. Sure. They didn't want you panicking, coming out of a coma
Right,
and panicking. Yeah.
right.
You have amazing parents.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
I'll be sure to tell them. They'll love that.
Well, it's true. So without giving too much away, do you want to give us a
Sure.
glimpse of the book and then we'll wrap up? You can share a little giveaway with listeners.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So I thought that the book, I guess a quick backstory was how I thought the book was going to pan out and then how it actually has panned out. So I thought it was going to be kind of like two big like chapters, like before April 1st, 2012
Hmm.
or 2011. Sorry, I was 12 years old, and then after,
Yeah.
kind of like before my transplant and after. And what it's ended up turning out to be is a collection of essays that kind of look back in order for me to look forward at the next 10.
Hmm.
And the idea behind that is because heart transplants have an average lifespan of about 20 years, right?
Yeah.
20 kind of in the middle, 30 plus on the really lucky end. And so I kind of felt like I was having a midlife crisis at 21,
Mm,
21 and 22.
okay.
Um, and so that anxiety was kind of I would say, the motivation to really kind of look into my past, to be okay with it and to come to terms with it so that I can have a future that is not weighed down by the last 10 years.
Yes.
And so I talk about what it's like, to be in college with a heart transplant, what it was like, going back to school after, being in the hospital for so long, and then going to school thinking I'm the same person as I was Emma, a month ago, but now I'm Emma, the heart transplant recipient and the sick kid.
Hmm.
I'm Emma, the liability, right? Emma, like we need to come up with all these plans to keep Emma safe, and Emma, the patient, and all these different identities that in my head I was just still Emma, and
Right.
I am still Emma.
Which is
I'm Emma
good.
the college, I'm
Which is
Emma the
good.
college graduate, right?
Yeah.
I'm Emma the author, but I'm also Emma the recipient, and so my book is coming to terms with the fact that that is not going to change, and I cannot cure myself of being a recipient.
Sure.
Um, and as a
It,
perfectionist, that is quite hard. So I want to perfect this. I want to perfect being sick, and I
right.
want to perfect being a patient, and it's not possible.
Are you also saying that you could see how people were looking at you and worried about you, and you just wanted to continue being Emma?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I had to put myself in their shoes to finish the story because without them, there is no me, right? Without our caregivers, without our loved ones, without our family members,
Hmm.
I know for certain I would not be where I am without them. And so I had to not only write from my perspective, but imagine how they were feeling, right, during all of this too. And so
Yes.
that was a huge learning and growth experience for me that I also didn't intend or want to really learn, if I'm
Hmm.
being honest. But when I started writing this, and I'm really, really full of gratitude that I was able to kind of take that from this experience.
Yes. Well, the fact that you studied abroad shows me that you still wanted to go out and live your life. Even if people were worried about you, you knew you needed to follow your gut.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that has been something I think since the day I left the hospital that I've been preparing for
Yeah.
is my independence. And so that
Good.
looked like learning all my medication, scheduling doctor's appointments by myself, going to the doctor by myself,
Hmm.
all to prepare me for these moments so that I can travel and experience life the way I want to without my health, hopefully not impacting it.
Knock
Right.
wood.
Yeah. Yeah. Without my
So
health being a huge hindrance.
Of course. Do you have a kind of a bucket list of places you want to go?
I used to, and then I read this amazing book, No Cure for Being Human by Kate Bowler, and I quote her work a lot in my book. And I've come to the, I would say, acceptance that there will never be enough things that I want to experience to quantify on a bucket list. I think for right now, I'm really just sticking to what do I want to finish this year?
Good.
What do I want to finish, this month, this
Yeah.
week? And trying to be okay with the fact that I'm not right planning for 10, 20, 30 years, that
Yeah.
I'm really just trying to understand and be okay with right now,
Yes.
which is
And
huge
be
for me.
present, to be
Right.
mindful and present. So we're going to wrap up, but you told me you were going to give a giveaway.
Yes, I'm so excited. So thanks to Janine, we're able to provide the first chapter of my book for free, and then people can download it and then get a taste of it and then buy it, hopefully, if they like what they read.
Fantastic. And what's your website?
EmmaRothman.com. So you can buy the books on my website, and also reach out to me. I would love to hear your stories of kind of dealing with the chronic messiness of life, right? It doesn't have to be just transplant oriented. But if it is, that's also wonderful too, because I would love to meet more people in the organ donation and transplantation community as well.
Fantastic. This has been great. I want to thank you so much for calling in. You're calling in from Chicago. Is it freezing?
Yes. It's snowing right now,
Oh,
so
it's
I'm
snowing.
ready. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
I feel like
Okay.
I'm in Syracuse still sometimes.
I know. I know. Well, happy holidays. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and I look forward to at some point meeting you in person.
Thank you so much, Janine. It's such a pleasure.